welcome to another episode of the Heal Your Worldview podcast. Your host, James Knight. And this podcast is dedicated to looking at your current philosophical worldview and connecting it with the childhood trauma that we've all received while we were growing up. And what I say everyone is because at this point, when just looking at how everybody has really bad behaviors in general on how they interact with other people, it's obvious that the majority of us suffer from these traumas. And, even though it's probably a little hyperbolic to say everyone, I just do it anyway because just assume you have it. Assume this is just a way to stay humble, which is what I want to talk about today is how do you keep your humility and keep your head on right in this weird world where the rules are always changing. And this is how I look at it, and maybe it'll help anybody that would like some kind of way of looking at it that they could maybe fold into their own strategies. So this is how I work. So I'm essentially just practicing the scientific method, okay? And I don't mean the scientific method as Anthony Fauci practices it, where he is science, and if you question him, you question science. That's not how science works. Science is a process of someone making a truth claim and someone challenging their truth claim, and then the process of the guy that made the truth claim proving that what he said is true is actually true, and that looks like someone else doing an experiment that reproduces the results of the truth claim. And then another guy will pick up the mantle, he'll do the same experiment, and eureka, we have consensus, and we put that into the books as this is a fact. Okay, this is true. If you do this chemical with this chemical, you get this result every single time. Yes. Check the box. Got it. So in the scientific realm of things, you have to be always open to having new evidence affect what you accept as true now. Now, some things are not the way, right? You don't have to worry about them ever getting overturned. Like, if you put a penny in citric acid, it will take off the tarnish. That stuff will never get overturned, okay? But as the theories in science get more abstract, those you have to be very careful of. Those theories are often overturned. Or here's a good one, Newtonian physics, and then Einstein just added on to it. It's not like he negated Newtonian physics. What he did added on to it. And we won't talk about the controversy around Einstein. I know, I get it, guys. I know that there's, claims out there that his stuff was not valid, but leave that alone for now. So how do I keep my intellectual humility? Okay, I operate in the philosophical and the psychological and the historical spaces. That's my passion. That's what I like to do. I like to get all geeky in those spaces, and one toe in the greater universe stuff and that kind of thing, but very careful over there in general. Right now, every value that I hold dear, I always leave open for it to be adjusted, like Newtonian and Einsteinian. I leave it open to be added to so that I don't get dogmatic. So what my primary goal in keeping my intellectual humility in a good place is I'm like, okay, what I'm saying right now has to allow for new evidence to change the direction of whatever it is I'm talking about is going in. So how does that work? For a long time, so my backstory real quick is I've been studying philosophy since I was in my teenage years. I went to a standard public school, high school, but I had a teacher there he was an English teacher, and he wanted to introduce some college level classes into high school. And what he brought in was a mythology class and a world religions class, which I also took again when I went to college. And he did a really good job in that. He was in that space, and that was my first real pursuit into philosophy was, I think, 11th or 10th or 11th grade, whatever. And it was very useful. And my interest in philosophy came from watching the 1984 Conan the Barbarian movie when it had that Nietzsche quote in the beginning. It says, "That which does not kill you makes you stronger." And I always thought that was the coolest thing I ever saw. I still love that movie to today. minus Schwarzenegger's "Screw Your Freedom" nonsense. But I still like that genre. Swords and Sorcerers have always really resonated with me. I really like that space. So I've been studying philosophy for, just call it 30 years, okay? But more like 40 now. I don't know. If we go back to 15, I'm 55. That's 40 years. Anyway, how do you stay humble, especially as you start to assemble all this knowledge and all these pieces and it's working? You're gaining success, you're gaining, accolades, whatever, okay? And how do you not drink your own Kool-Aid? Just in general. I'm not even famous or anything. I'm just, at the stage of my life where I have a great amount of confidence in how I approach things because it's served me well. I'm a reasonably successful human in a world full of unsuccessful humans. I do give credit to my awareness of staying humble, okay? But not like the bend the knee humble, right? Now, interestingly, in the religious standpoint, especially the Jewish, I can't remember the name of that little hat. Is it the yarmulke? I can't remember. Anyways, they wear that little hat. And that is a similar device. That device is to remind them that they're small, to remind them that they're underneath something greater. That is what that item is for. And I appreciate that device, right? It's the problem with the religious version is you bend the knee to your Lord and Savior. You bend the knee to the superior being. You bend the knee because you are insignificant. That methodology doesn't resonate with me, okay? I don't understand why people need to feel that small because that seems antithetical to a healthy pride in what you do well. It's important to have some pride, right? We're not talking about arrogance. We're talking about pride. Now, this is the weird part about how society works, but a seven deadly sin is pride, but pride is not a bad thing. Arrogance is a bad thing. So to mistake arrogance for pride misses the point of what pride is for. If you're a tradesman or a craftsman and you make a beautiful functional piece of art, like a knife maker or whatever, all those guys, right? Potters, there's all kinds of trades out there. There's all kinds of artisans. And you should be proud of what you created. That is an important piece. And I do struggle with this element of Western culture where we frown on that. I think then we only get the arrogant guys, the narcissistic version of pride, where it's a superiority complex. That's not pride at all. That misses the entire point of what pride is. But you use your humility, and I use it specifically as you use your intellectual humility to make sure that you have your head on right, so that you don't go wandering into the dogmatic weeds that I would say, if you compare Homer's Odyssey with what we're dealing with now, anything dogmatic is the sirens, okay? Dogma brings your ship in and crashes it on the rocks and you get marooned on their island. And that's what dogma is. And I usually call it a cul-de-sac, but Homer's Odyssey is also very good to let you know that one of the dangers that you're going to face in any pursuit, but especially in the intellectual spaces, because there's a lot of bad philosophy. There's a lot of hubris. There's a lot of terrible things that you can crash your ship into when those sirens call you in. You can see academia going through that right now, right? Academia should be a wonderful thing. You're pursuing truth. You're pursuing wisdom, knowledge, all those things that a liberal arts degree used to imply that would make your life better are now used for propaganda and programming ideological viewpoint. It's amazing because the liberal arts degree should have made you immune to ideology. It's a very bizarre twist, but maybe I'm looking at it too naively, and maybe the academia has always been polluted like this, and I'm just not an expert in that field, so I don't notice it, and I just listen to their talking points. This is one of those excellent things that happens to you when you read Robert Greene's book, 40 Laws of Power and 33 Strategies of War. It awakens your consciousness to how power politics look and feel and work. Because if you're just a blue-collar guy like me, you're never going to get an education in power. I mean, the only power that I'm exposed to on the familial and friend level is just, rudimentary stuff where people are trying to manipulate a little bit to get their way, right? There's not much more going on than that. It's very it's not even amateur, right? You couldn't even call it amateur level power. But when you read Robert Greene's book or Machiavelli, right? Machiavelli really lays down some good stuff, right? He really exposes how, and that's where the psychopathic system really is born. Why is Western culture, every country has some kind of corrupt government running, whatever socialism, capitalism, whatever your ism is, there's a corrupt piece running in the country you live in. And we get caught up in this propaganda, my ism is better than your ism. But isn't it funny that when we are in these tit for tat exchanges talking about capitalism and socialism, both sides kind of ignore the corruption that has infected their ideology. Okay? Now, I think the capitalists are a little bit more in tune with the corruption because it is a problem, right? We know about monopolies and all that kind of stuff, and we try to be mindful, blah, blah, blah. But because the system is psychopathic and corrupt, and it incentivizes the corruption, it's near impossible to keep that psychopathic system from going in the direction it's going in. And that's the whole point of it. It's God, what is the deal? It's dangerously self-interested, but it's narcissistically self-interested, okay? I mean, there's a healthy self-interest. That's what the point of egoism is. Egoism is focus on yourself first, become a good person, have your act together, have your head on right, and then what you're doing will radiate out from you into the community and make the community a better place. And the altruists are coming at it from the other direction, which is, well, we know what the greater good should be, so we expect you all to sacrifice yourself to make sure that greater good happens. And then the problem is that the system is psychopathic, so that greater good gets tortured and twisted in so many directions that the greater good becomes evil. Like, if you really look at it, like it's a crazy thing that we're looking at, where like the greater good, the ends justify the mean, the Machiavellian type thinking jumps on that thing that should be a good thing. Like, I can imagine, in the altruist model, if everybody was doing it, sure, it would work, right? But the problem is you can't get humans into the altruist mindset, because the moment we see someone else sloughing off, it makes us cynical, as it should, because we have a problem. And that's the kind of stuff I like to talk about on this podcast, is these little things that people kind of walk past. It's like you're walking down a path in the woods and there's a cluster of something on the ground and you don't even notice it. You just walk on past. Say it was a cluster of poison ivy. You walked right through it and now your leg is all torn up and you're itching and having all the reactions to the poison ivy. Well, that's the same thing that happens with the systems we find ourselves living under, okay? Like, my entire lifetime, the government, local, state, county, whatever, all they do is try to scheme to get more money out of us. It's like there's never a steady state in government. Like, somehow the government thinks they're a corporation and they always need to be growing, which is a twisted kind of way to run a company too, right? You don't always need to be growing. I mean, sometimes you just need to do what you do best and don't get too ambitious. It's a lot of companies that diversify really hard, end up not doing any of it well. The government is in that place, right? The government is trying to be all things to all people. All we do is get to give them more money, and they will make more benevolent choices for us with that money, and they will make programs, and they will steer us in the right direction of the greater good. And then, the township over, their version of the greater good, just a little different than this one you're living in, okay? And then the county's just a little different, and the state, just a little different. And then you have this mess of, well, what exactly are the rules? What is the greater good again? And you're like, there is no greater good because it's a moving target. And then, so these little things, they stack up. And that is a problem of intellectual humility. When you are dogmatic on a thing, it blinds you. Okay, so let's say you're a good little communist. You had all those professors in your social sciences classes, and you don't realize that they dropped dogma into your head. And now you defend this dogma as you leave college. It's the same thing. I was in the military. It's the same idea. You're loyal. There's something about those years from 18 to 22, maybe 25, that it creates a loyalty in you, and you can be manipulated because of it. And college is no different. There's no different there. They're supposed to enlighten you, but they usually capture you. They're usually the best at capturing you. But, that's a debate topic that we can say which one of these industries is actually better at capturing minds than the others. So what do we do? Well, step one is you got to keep your mind honest. You have got to purge the dogma from your worldview. You've got to do this. These dogma points are like little lies that we build a narrative around. And I talk about this often, is be careful of the narrative you have built to justify your bad behavior. If your narrative is taking you in a good direction, that's fine, right? But the problem with the narrative is it can be twisted. It can be turned into a bad direction. Let's say you have like a setback in your life and you find yourself, you lose your job, you lose your relationship, whatever. And now you're in a state of unknown is in your future. You don't know which way to go, and you can start to doubt yourself. That's when self-doubt starts to creep in, and it can really undermine you, especially if you've gone this far with a narrative that led to success, but when you pull back the covers, it's just a story you tell yourself so that you do these behaviors, and those behaviors led to success. There's nothing wrong with that, except for in the context of now you had a life setback and now you're vulnerable. Which direction are you going to go with your future when what worked for you in the past is now in doubt? It's important. Okay, so the humility comes in, but you have to, what do you base your humility on? Okay, now the reason why why I am in the scientific method category is because science is about measuring and reproducing. So its results you can rely on, right? There's a lot of conservative elements that are based in this kind of thinking where we know that works. We've been doing it for centuries. Let's keep doing that. And then the problem with the conservative side is it gets dogmatic so that when that thing stops working, they don't let you get rid of it. That's the problem with conservatism, is their dogma is based on what worked in the past. And it's very true that most of the time that those techniques, especially if you're just, living in your life and you're a human, those techniques, of course, they're going to serve you well. That's why they've been around for hundreds of years. The tricky part is all of those techniques are loaded up with dogmatic points, dogmatic talking points, points that people just repeat. I heard a guy talking about, let's say you're on a certain side of things. You could be a Democrat or a Republican, and let's say you're out there and you're trying to do some activism and you're spitting out all the dogmatic talking points that you were told are true, and someone asks you to explain one of them, and you can't do it because you're just out there repeating talking points. It's like, well, what does that mean? I think Vivek did a hell of a job in the Republican primary when he asked any of the people that were for the Ukraine war to name one. It was effectively the same as a state inside Ukraine. He was like, name one of them, and none of them could. They're up there talking about all the money and all the stuff and all the support. They're just regurgitating the talking points. And so he nailed them to the cross when he asked them that, right? That actually changed the course of the primary. It really blew up all the other people that thought they had a shot at nomination this year. And I reflect on that. I'm like, now that's the kind of thing you do, is you challenge people with their claims. So a great thing you learn in philosophy, especially when you're learning the logical fallacies, is this one. It's he who makes the truth claim owns the burden of proof. This is a classic fallacy that gets manipulated over and over and over and over again. Okay? And the one that jumps to mind that is the top of the list is when a Christian claims God exists, and then you say, well, prove it. And they say, I don't have to prove it. You have to prove that he doesn't exist. No, I didn't make the truth claim. You did. That's just one example of it. Another example of it is that government spending is good for the economy. Prove it. Well, look, the economy is running fine. No, it's not. See, there's so many examples of that one fallacy that gets us into great trouble. And those are the kind of things that allow dogmatic points to come into your mind and affect you. So the first rule is you got to stay curious, you got to stay intellectually humble, you've got to be open to whatever viewpoint you have. You have to be open for it to be challenged, and you have to be patiently willing to explain yourself and be open to changes in how you're doing things. Okay? This is one thing that humans must always be open to. There's generally always a better way to do something. And maybe you are already doing the best way to do it, but it's nothing wrong with from time to time that you look at another one and compare it to what you're doing and then say, okay, yeah, actually, I think my way is a little better. I'll just stick with that. Or you see that thing done, you're like, man, that's great. I'm gonna, abandon what I've been doing. I'm gonna do that from now on. I'm a blue collar guy, right? So I'm a tradesman, and I can't tell you how many great tricks that I've adopted from other guys just by watching over their shoulder what they're doing. There's so much knowledge out there in the world. And if you have the curiosity and the intellectual humility, when you see it, it really is like, wow, that's a great technique. I'm going to do that one. It makes my life better every time I see that technique and realize it's better than what I'm doing. Right. And at this stage in my expertise, I know the moment I see it, I know it's better than what I was doing. It's like I don't even have to question it. I don't even have to question myself. I'm just like, ooh, that's a good technique. I'm taking that one. So that's how humans learn. I mean, that's the reason why our civilization gets more and more complex over time is simply because we learn, and then we can record and store the knowledge, and that knowledge gets passed on to the next generation, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, the problem is they skipped over the inventing of the wheel part, and then things get dogmatic. There's this weird thing that happens, right? The dogma comes in because the next generation or the generation after that has lost touch with why. Why do we do that? Okay? Like, why do we not go into the woods alone and use the bathroom? Why don't you do it alone? Well, because that's where you're vulnerable. You're going to get killed, right? Whether it be by an animal or some other tribe that sees you over there, taking care of your business, and boom, you're toast. And you're out there alone, so you don't have a buddy watching you. So the buddy system then becomes a dogmatic thing where you're getting yelled at because you didn't have your buddy with you. Well, it's because you haven't run into the problem yet that somebody you knew got killed because they didn't have their buddy. Now, once that happens again, it reinforces everything, and then that generation goes, oh, yeah, okay. But the problem is you're disconnected from the chain that created that revered technique, okay? The one that becomes part of the culture. See, culture is what folds all that stuff in, and then culture, right? If you question the culture, then things get scary, right? Because you're like, why do we do it that way? And then they don't know why. Your elders don't know why they do it. They just were told to do it that way, and so they do. And then you're like, huh, right? You're the next generation, like, why do we do that? Why are we doing it that way? And they're like, don't ever question this. This is how it's done. This is what keeps us alive. It becomes a really weird dynamic that is now you can't question it. And this is where we run into the humility problem. This is the problem. So as a safeguard against your dogmatic acceptance of what you were taught by your elders, we got to keep our curiosity online, okay? Curiosity is, like, I don't know if you guys have ever been parents, but there's this crazy time of life when your kid is like, what is it? They're like between, I want to say 3 and maybe 6 or 7. It's the why stage of life. And they're like, why? They never get tired of asking you why something is the way it is, right? And then it could get a little tedious, but it's also, you can see the relentless nature of the accumulation of knowledge. That's the time of life when you're starting to wake up to all this complicated stuff. Before that, it's very simple, You can't even keep your kid from picking something up off the ground that's full of dog hair and put it in their mouth. It's a really tough time. You can see why the infant mortality rate was so high a few hundred years ago, because they just put it in their mouth, man. It's hard to keep them safe. And all of this is in it's just all there, right? You could see that we had to stay curious, but conservative values shun curiosity. Okay, that's what a conservative value does, is like, this is the way we do it, don't you question it. So you can see why the younger generations butt up against the ceiling of conservatism. Okay, conservatism can become overbearing, and that is a huge problem. But we also have to be careful of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as if all conservative things are to be discarded. No, some of those are actually important. Economic values, all these things are very important. What is freedom? What is freedom of speech? Why do we have it? It's to protect us from the dogma people. It's to protect us from those people that accept their values without questioning anything. And that is the biggest problem humanity faces, is, why do you believe what you believe? Did you rigorously get there, or did you just grow up with this message and these talking points, and that's where you are? And if you're in the second category, you got to get out of there. It does not serve you. It just makes you more frustrated. I remember when I got really frustrated and really angry with politics. I was close to 30, I think. It was in this ballpark. And I just, no matter what was going on, the politics was just making me angry. Number one is because it didn't make sense. It never made sense to me, because I was taking it at face value. I was not educated in the Machiavellian stuff yet. And so I take the talking points at face value. So of course I get angry when I find out that did not happen. Like, why didn't that happen? You said you were going to do that and you didn't. And once I broke out of the left-right paradigm, I felt much better. And I saw them both for what they are, is they're just power players playing the game of power. And so they all lie. Everybody in Washington lies, okay, in their own way. And you gotta learn the ways that they manipulate you, because what they do is they're very, very sophisticated, and they slip in a section of truth, and then they put in their nonsense all around it, whatever their nonsense is. And everyone has, funny enough, everybody has their own fingerprint of what their nonsense is. Okay, so that part's hard. Now, luckily for us, we have the DNC and the RNC, so you can just go to their website and look up what they represent, and it'll tell you. You can pick off the good parts with the bad parts, right? But throughout all of this, how do you navigate these dangerous waters? It is your intellectual humility, and it is your connection with reality. That is your sword and shield, okay? That is the armor that you wear in civilization. If we're all hunter-gatherers, we don't need to have that kind of stuff in us, right? We know what techniques work. We know how to live. We know how to survive. And your curiosity will help you advance and protect your family and your tribe. But that's not where we live. We're not in that place anymore. We're not hunter-gatherers anymore. Now we're in this, it's almost obscenely complicated now, how civilization is. You've got it's like herding cats. You got everybody running in 100 different directions, and you're just kind of sitting there on the sideline like, well, which direction should I go in? Well, that's hard to figure out if you're not connected to reality, if you don't have your basic debate skills in place, your understanding of logical fallacies. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and it is very tricky, okay? Because if you don't learn it, you are going to be taken advantage of at some point, and that's the problem. So anyway, this is really important stuff. This is the kind of stuff I cover, and it's going to make your life better. I promise you that the initial pain of challenging your worldview will definitely relax, and it will start to yield into a much better replacement, right? One that is, it's honest, it's your curiosity is there, all the good things that you need in order to just be at peace with the world around you, right? Once you're at peace with the world around you, then you can easily evaluate anything new that comes towards you. It's the younger years that's the problem, because the younger years, it's like there's so much coming in. It's a fire hose of information, and you got to drink, okay? And you have no time to separate the good from the bad on the arena of ideas, and there's not much you could do about it, right? It's a problem. but it's one that you eventually figure out, or I hope you figure out, because once you figure it out, it's like, okay. And then you're immune to manipulation. You're immune to the mental health problems of others. You got this way to look at things. You're open, you're curious, so you don't have to worry about, becoming that guy where you're now a dogmatic thinker. That's the greatest sin of all. But you're also confident in what you know. You're confident in the pieces you have, and you can apply a conservative template over the top of what you know. And it really does help. I mean, there's nothing worse than being insecure about something, okay? And most people struggle with insecurity. Why? Well, because they're lacking the key pieces of their intellectual foundation that protects them from all the crazy crap. This is not me being better than you. This is just like my foundation's better. It's not me saying I'm superior to anybody. No, I just got lucky. Okay. I ended up on the right track, the right acquisition of knowledge track, and here I am. But I can actually share with you. So if what I'm saying resonates with you, yeah, please subscribe to the channel and let's move forward together so that you don't have to feel like this anymore. Because I know it's much better to be in this place than the place I was in my 20s when I'm just trying to figure all this stuff out. I mean, what a pain in the butt. But that's what I'm here for, okay? It's time for me to share this stuff with everybody because it makes my life better too, right? I mean, the world is full of confused people. It's very sad to watch everybody like running around in 100 different directions, and you could see that they're heading for the cliff, but nothing you could do about it. So if you found some value and you enjoyed this podcast, by all means, please hit the like button and possibly subscribe to the channel. And as always, I'll see you on the next one, and have a great day.